Let's talk about the virgin birth of Jesus and why I don't think it happened according to the Bible. And if I'm correct, this point alone would disprove Catholicism, Christianity, and Islam. And it would demonstrate that neither the Bible nor the Quran are holy books of God, but the works of men. So on the side of support, there is only one reason to believe that Jesus was born to a virgin mother Mary. And that reason is because the anonymous author of the book of Matthew said clearly that Joseph didn't know her sexually until she had given birth to her firstborn son named Jesus. Now let's look at the scriptural support against the virgin birth. Luke 1 is the only other account of the birth of Jesus, and Luke admits that he was not an eyewitness, nor was he inspired because he had to trace down the events. In verse 31, the angel is not specific as to when, but he tells Mary she will conceive in the future. In verse 27, he specifically makes the point that Joseph was of the house of David. And in verse 32, it says Jesus would be given the throne of his father David. In verse 35, the angel again uses future tense and says she will become pregnant in the future. In verse 44, there's no indication that Mary is even pregnant yet. And when Mary greets Elizabeth, it is Mary's voice that makes the baby leap in Elizabeth's womb. In Luke 2, verse 4, it once again states that Joseph was of the family and house of David. Verse 5 is the first indication that Mary is pregnant. And it says that she was his betrothed wife, but there is no specific mention as to whether she has had sex or not. Verse 21 clearly states that when the angel appeared to Mary, it was before she conceived. Verse 23 quotes Exodus 13 and says, "Every firstborn male shall be called holy." In verse 27, Joseph is called Jesus' parent. In verse 41, Joseph is called his parent again. And in verse 48, Mary tells Jesus, "Your father and I have been looking for you." And in verse 50, Mary was confused when Jesus said he was in his father's house. And so, according to Luke, Mary thought Joseph was the father of Jesus. So Matthew 1:25 is the only verse in the entire Bible that testifies to a virgin birth. And Paul was quoting the Hebrew scriptures when he said, "At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established." So the virgin birth story does not meet biblical standards of reliability. Jesus agreed in John 5 that a single witness is not valid. Matthew's account of the virgin birth should be especially concerning since there is a law that says anyone humbling his neighbor's betrothed virgin should be executed along with the woman for not crying out against it. The author of Matthew seemed to be aware of this law when he said Joseph, her husband, being a righteous man and not willing to make her a public example, intended to put her away secretly. So according to Matthew, Joseph chose to deliberately disobey God in order to save Mary's life. But would a righteous man deliberately disobey God? And there's even more we could talk about, such as the Genesis 6 evil when the sons of God mated with the daughters of men. And this evil contributed to Noah's flood. We have 2 different genealogies in Matthew and Luke. We have multiple prophecies that Jesus would be the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it's impossible to even give a reliable testimony to a virgin birth unless Mary had been locked in a prison by herself her whole life. But before I close this video, I want to share with you another blatant lie in the book of Matthew concerning the virgin birth. Matthew says, "Now all this has happened that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall give birth to a son. They shall call his name Emmanuel." This is a quote from Isaiah 7:14, but Isaiah 7 was fulfilled in Isaiah 8, and it was not about a virgin, nor was it about Jesus. The prophecy was fulfilled by Maher-shalal-hash-baz, and Alma does not mean virgin, it means a young woman. And so Matthew's account of the virgin birth is completely unreliable.